Commander Vrextal stood on the bridge of his massive warship, watching the stars through the viewing window. His yellow eyes glowed with satisfaction as he looked at the latest report on his datapad. Another successful hunt had ended just 3 days ago. The crystal beings from Arcturus 7 were now working in the mining colonies, their beautiful shells cracked and dulled from hard labor. The Zephyrian Hunting Consortium had ruled the galaxy for over 3,000 years. They were the most feared warriors in known space. Standing 7 feet tall with thick scales covering their muscular bodies, they could tear apart most aliens with their bare claws. Their technology was advanced beyond what most species could imagine. Their ships moved faster than light and carried weapons that could destroy entire planets. But what made them truly dangerous was not their strength or their weapons. It was their complete lack of mercy. The Zephyrians saw other species as nothing more than animals to be hunted, captured, or killed for sport. They had turned cruelty into an art form and suffering into entertainment. Vrextal had been leading hunting expeditions for over 200 years. He remembered his first hunt when he was just a young warrior. His father had taken him to watch as they captured a group of peaceful traders from the Vega system. The memory still made him smile. The way those soft creatures had begged for their lives had been music to his ears. Since then, he had conquered dozens of worlds. The telepathic Mindari had tried to use their mental powers against him, but Zephyrian minds were too strong and too focused on violence. The warrior clans of Korath Prime had put up a good fight for almost a year before Vrextal had finally broken their spirit. Even the proud and ancient Harmony Collective had fallen to his forces after he threatened to destroy their sacred breeding worlds. Every species eventually broke. It was simply a matter of finding the right pressure point and applying enough force. Some collapsed when their military was defeated. Others gave up when their cities were bombed. A few held out until their children were threatened. But they all surrendered in the end. It was the natural order of the universe. The strong ruled and the weak served. Lieutenant Kexmore approached the commander with a new intelligence report. The young Zephyrian's scales were still bright green, showing his excitement. "Commander, our long-range scouts have found something interesting in the Outer Rim territories." Vrextal took the datapad and studied the information, a small blue planet in a system the locals called Sol. The third planet from their star was home to a species that called itself human. The initial scans showed they had recently developed faster-than-light travel, which meant they were just beginning to explore beyond their homeworld. "Tell me about these humans," Vrextal said, his voice deep and rough like grinding stones. Kexmore pulled up more data on his portable screen. "They appear to be mammals, Commander. Bipedal, averaging around 6 feet in height. They have no natural weapons like claws or fangs. Their skin is soft and easily damaged. They seem to be divided into many small nations that fight constantly among themselves." Vrextal laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Divided primitives who fight each other instead of working together. How many of them are there?" "Approximately 8 billion on their home world, with small colonies on nearby planets and space stations." The commander's eyes widened slightly. 8 billion was a large population, even by Zephyrian standards. That meant a lot of potential slaves and a lot of entertainment for the hunting games. "What about their military capabilities?" "Very primitive, Commander. They still use chemical explosives and metal projectiles for most of their weapons. Their ships are slow and clumsy compared to ours. Our analysts believe a single hunting fleet could conquer their entire system within 1 solar cycle." Vrextal studied the images of human cities, their crude spacecraft, and their simple weapons. They looked so weak and helpless. Their buildings were made of concrete and glass instead of the energy-resistant materials that advanced civilizations used. Their soldiers carried small firearms that would barely scratch Zephyrian armor. But what caught his attention most was their diversity. The humans came in different skin colors and had many different cultures. This was perfect for the hunting games. Variety always made the entertainment more interesting for the crowds back on the homeworlds. "Prepare the first hunting fleet," Vrextal ordered. "We leave for the Sol system in 2 days." Kexmore nodded eagerly. "How many ships should we take, Commander?" 50 vessels should be more than enough. We want this to be a proper hunt, not a quick extermination. Bring the arena ships and the slave transports. This could provide entertainment for years if we manage it correctly. As his lieutenant hurried away to make preparations, Vrextal turned back to the viewing window. He could already imagine the humans begging for mercy as his warriors descended from the sky. He pictured their crude weapons bouncing harmlessly off Zephyrian shields while his forces rounded up the strongest specimens for the fighting pits. The thought made him hungry. It had been too long since he had faced a species that might provide some real sport before inevitably falling to superior Zephyrian power. These humans looked weak, but they were numerous enough to make the hunt interesting. In 2 days, Vrextal would set course for Earth, confident that he was about to add another easy victory to his long list of conquests. He had no way of knowing that he was making the biggest mistake in Zephyrian history. The humans waiting in the Sol system were unlike any species the galaxy had ever seen. They were about to teach the hunters what it truly meant to be hunted. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee on the bridge of the exploration ship Endeavour when the alarm started screaming. The sound echoed through every corridor of the vessel, sending crew members running to their stations. Jake had been patrolling the outer edges of the solar system for 3 years, and nothing this exciting had ever happened before. "Report," Jake called out as he jumped from his chair, spilling hot coffee on his uniform. Communications Officer Lisa Park was already at her station, her fingers flying over the control panel. Her face was pale as she stared at the readings on her screen. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy signatures near Jupiter, multiple contacts, all unknown design." Jake moved to stand behind her, looking at the display that showed dozens of red dots moving through space. Each dot was larger than anything in the human fleet. "How big are we talking about?" "The smallest ones are twice the size of our biggest battleships," Lisa said, her voice shaking slightly. "The largest is bigger than anything we've ever built. These ships are using technology we don't recognize." Within minutes, the alien fleet had moved from Jupiter's orbit to Earth's moon. Jake had never seen anything move so fast through space. The human ships that had tried to intercept them were left behind like children chasing racing cars. The aliens maintained complete radio silence for the first 6 hours after their arrival. Every government on Earth tried to make contact. The United Nations sent greeting messages in every human language. Scientists broadcast mathematical sequences and star charts. Military commanders demanded identification and purpose. Nothing worked. The alien ships simply hung in space above Earth like dark clouds before a storm. Then the smaller ships began to move. Sleek black vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it descended toward major cities around the world. They moved slowly, deliberately, as if their occupants wanted to be seen by as many humans as possible. Jake watched from his position near Mars as the events unfolded on Earth. His orders were to maintain observation and report everything back to Solar Defense Command. He felt helpless knowing that his small exploration ship could do nothing against the massive alien fleet. At exactly 12 hours after their arrival, the aliens finally spoke. Every television, radio, and computer screen on Earth suddenly displayed the same image. A tall creature with yellow eyes and scales like a crocodile stared out at humanity. When it spoke, translation software somehow made its words understandable in every human language. "Primitive humans," the creature said, its voice cold and sharp, like breaking ice. "I am Commander Vrextal of the Zephyrian Hunting Consortium. You have been selected for harvesting by our organization." Jake felt his blood turn cold as the alien continued speaking. "Your species will provide entertainment for our games and labor for our colonies. We require 10 million of your strongest individuals to be delivered within 1 solar rotation. You will also surrender your brightest scientists and your most skilled warriors." The creature's yellow eyes seemed to look directly through the screen at every person watching. "Compliance is not optional. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your species. You have 24 of your hours to begin the selection process." The transmission ended, leaving Earth in stunned silence. Within minutes, emergency meetings were being held in every capital city on the planet. President Helen Carter of the North American Federation was the first world leader to speak publicly after the alien ultimatum. "Fellow citizens of Earth, she said, standing behind the podium in the White House briefing room. "We have faced extinction before. Our ancestors survived ice ages, plagues, and world wars. They overcame these challenges not by surrendering, but by standing together and fighting for their survival." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "Humanity does not kneel to anyone. We will not hand over our people to be slaves or entertainment. If these aliens want to fight, then by God we'll give them one." Similar messages were being broadcast from London, Moscow, Beijing, and every other major city. For the first time, in decades, old enemies were putting aside their differences. Nations that had been on the brink of war suddenly found themselves planning joint military operations. Admiral Roy Bennett of the Solar Defense Force was already mobilizing every available ship. The human fleet was tiny compared to the alien forces, but it was all they had. Military bases around the world went to high alert. Civilian populations were evacuated from major cities. Marine Colonel Kate Adams began coordinating ground defenses, even though everyone knew that conventional weapons might be useless against advanced alien technology. She ordered her troops to study every piece of information about the alien ships and weapons. Dr. Maya Thompson, one of Earth's leading physicists, was brought to the Pentagon to advise on possible alien technology. She had studied the energy, readings from the alien ships, and was already working on theories about how their weapons might function. Jake Morrison received new orders to bring his ship back to Earth immediately. Every human vessel was being recalled to help with the defense. As he set course for home, he could see the alien ships hanging over Earth like vultures waiting for something to die. The Zephyrians had expected immediate surrender. They had given humanity one day to begin handing over millions of people. Instead, they were watching as the entire planet prepared for war. Commander Vrextal stood on his bridge, studying reports from his scouts. The humans were not behaving as expected. Rather than panicking or fighting among themselves, they were working together with remarkable speed and efficiency. "Perhaps they do not understand the situation," Lieutenant Kexmore suggested. "Should we demonstrate our power by destroying one of their cities?" Vrextal nodded slowly. "Select a military target, something that will show them the futility of resistance without damaging too many potential slaves." He had no idea that he was about to learn his first lesson about humanity. These strange creatures became more dangerous when they were threatened, not less dangerous, and they had a disturbing tendency to treat impossible odds as merely another problem to be solved. Commander Vrextal expected the humans to surrender after his demonstration attack on their military base in Colorado. Instead, something completely unexpected happened. The attack seemed to make them angry rather than afraid. Within hours of the bombing, every major nation on Earth was sharing military secrets they had kept hidden for decades. The Americans gave their stealth technology to the Russians. The Chinese shared their advanced missile designs with their former enemies. Countries that had been fighting each other for years suddenly became close allies. Lieutenant Commander Alex Chen had been a test pilot before the aliens arrived. Now he found himself leading a squadron of modified fighter ships against an enemy that had technology beyond human understanding. His first mission was supposed to be a simple reconnaissance flight to study the alien patrol ships. Alex and his team approached the alien scouts using tactics they had learned from submarine warfare. They turned off all their engines and drifted through space like pieces of debris. The alien sensors were looking for active ships with running engines, not cold metal floating in the darkness. When they got close enough, Alex gave the signal. All 12 human fighters powered up at the same time and fired every weapon they had at the closest alien ship. The Zephyrian vessel was caught completely off guard. Its shields flickered and died under the concentrated attack. "Target destroyed," Alex reported back to base, hardly believing his own words. "Repeat, we have destroyed an alien scout ship." The victory was small, but it proved something important. The aliens could be hurt. They could be killed. They were not the unstoppable force they pretended to be. News of the successful attack spread across Earth faster than any official announcement. Morale improved dramatically when people learned that human weapons could actually damage alien ships. More importantly, military analysts began studying exactly how the attack had succeeded. Dr. Maya Thompson was working 20 hours a day in her laboratory, surrounded by pieces of wreckage from destroyed alien ships. She had barely slept since the invasion began, surviving on coffee and determination. Her breakthrough came at 3 in the morning on the 5th day of the war. Their shields operate on a specific frequency, she explained to the Emergency Military Council via video link. It's like a radio station. If we can broadcast on the same frequency but in reverse, we can cancel out their shield energy. The theory sounded simple, but making it work required modifying every human weapon system. Maya's team worked around the clock to develop the shield-disrupting technology. Within 2 weeks, the information was being used by human forces all over the solar system. But the military response was only part of what shocked the Zephyrians. When alien ground forces tried to raid human cities to capture slaves, they encountered resistance unlike anything they had seen in 3,000 years of conquest. The aliens expected civilians to run away or hide. Instead, they found entire neighborhoods that had been turned into fortresses. Humans used everything as weapons. They made bombs from household chemicals. They turned children's toys into remote-controlled explosives. They used their knowledge of their own cities to create deadly traps for the invading forces. In New York, construction workers used their equipment to bring down buildings on top of alien troops. In Tokyo, subway tunnels became a maze of ambushes and dead ends. In London, humans used the old sewer systems to move unseen through the city and attack alien patrols from behind. Colonel Pete Jackson was coordinating resistance efforts in Detroit when he realized something that changed his entire approach to the war. The aliens were used to fighting other aliens who thought like them. They expected logical, predictable responses to their attacks. "We don't fight fair," Pete told his officers during a strategy meeting in an abandoned factory. "We don't follow their rules. We do whatever it takes to win, even if it seems crazy or impossible." His teams began using tactics that no civilized military would consider. They used wounded soldiers as bait to lure alien rescue teams into ambushes. They sent kamikaze attacks using unmanned vehicles packed with explosives. They even used children to carry messages, because the aliens didn't expect humans to involve their young in warfare. Captain Jake Morrison had returned to Earth with his exploration ship and was now part of Admiral Bennett's defensive fleet. His ship was small and fast, perfect for hit-and-run attacks. He led raids on alien supply convoys, striking quickly and disappearing before the enemy could respond. "The key is to never fight them the way they expect," Jake explained to other ship captains. "They're stronger than us and they have better technology, but they think in straight lines. They expect us to meet them head-on in big battles where their advantages matter most." Instead, human forces broke into small groups that attacked alien targets and then vanished. They used guerrilla tactics in space just like resistance fighters had used them on Earth for centuries. The aliens found themselves fighting an enemy that was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Commander Vrextal was becoming increasingly frustrated with the human response. Every day brought new reports of destroyed Zephyrian ships and failed raids. The humans were not behaving like any species he had conquered before. "They fight like wild animals," Lieutenant Kexmore reported after another failed attempt to capture human civilians. "They show no concern for their own safety. Some of them actually choose to die rather than be captured." Vrextal studied the battle reports with growing unease. The humans were adapting to Zephyrian tactics faster than any species should be able to learn. They seemed to treat every defeat as a lesson rather than a reason to surrender. Worse, intelligence. Reports suggested that the humans were somehow communicating with other species across the galaxy. Messages were being sent to worlds that had been conquered by the Zephyrians years ago. The humans were sharing information about Zephyrian weaknesses and tactical vulnerabilities. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Vrextal began to wonder if he had made a serious mistake in choosing to hunt humanity. 6 months after the invasion began, Commander Vrextal faced a situation he had never experienced in 200 years of conquest. His forces were losing. What should have been a quick and easy hunt had turned into a nightmare that seemed to get worse every day. The humans had done something no other species had ever managed. They had learned to fight back effectively, and they were getting better at it with terrifying speed. Every week brought new human tactics that the Zephyrians had never encountered before. Captain Danny Rodriguez commanded a group of converted, mining ships that the humans called the Ghost Fleet. These vessels had been cargo haulers and asteroid miners before the war. Now they moved through space like deadly shadows, appearing without warning to attack Zephyrian supply lines. Danny had grown up in the slums of Mexico City, where survival meant being smarter and quicker than the gangs that controlled the streets. He brought that same cunning to space warfare, treating the alien ships like rival gangs that needed to be outsmarted rather than overpowered. "Remember, we're not trying to win a fair fight," Danny told his captains during their latest planning session. "We're trying to make them afraid to leave their big ships. We want them looking over their shoulders every time they think they're safe." His tactics worked better than anyone had expected. The Ghost Fleet would hide near asteroid fields or behind planets, waiting for Zephyrian convoys to pass by. Then, they would strike with everything they had and disappear before the enemy could organize a response. In one particularly successful attack, Danny's ships destroyed an entire Zephyrian battle group by pretending to be disabled civilian vessels. When the aliens moved in to capture what they thought were helpless refugees, they found themselves surrounded by heavily armed warships that opened fire at point-blank range. On Earth, the occupation was going even worse for the Zephyrians. Colonel Pete Jackson had turned urban warfare into a science that the aliens could not understand or counter. Every human city had become a death trap for Zephyrian ground forces. The aliens were used to conquering species that fought in organized armies, with clear command structures. When they defeated the military, the civilians usually surrendered, but humans did not work that way. Every human civilian seemed to be a potential soldier, and every building could hide a dozen different traps. In Chicago, Pete's forces had turned the subway tunnels into a maze of ambushes and explosives. Zephyrian patrols would enter the underground, thinking they were chasing a small group of rebels, only to find themselves surrounded by hundreds of armed humans who knew every inch of the tunnel system. "The key is to make them feel helpless," Pete explained to resistance leaders from other cities. "They're used to being the predators. We need to make them feel like prey." The psychological warfare was working. Zephyrian soldiers were becoming nervous and jumpy. They started shooting at shadows and calling for backup when they heard unexpected noises. Some refused to leave their ships without massive escort forces, but the real breakthrough came when Dr. Sarah Martinez successfully reverse-engineered the Zephyrian communication system. Working with equipment salvaged from destroyed alien ships, she managed to crack their faster-than-light messaging technology. "We can now communicate with other species across the galaxy," Sarah announced to the Emergency Council. "And more importantly, we can share everything we've learned about how to fight the Zephyrians." The first species to respond was the Arctrans, the crystal-shelled beings that the Zephyrians had enslaved decades earlier. They had been forced to work in mining colonies, but they had never stopped hoping for freedom. When they received the human messages about Zephyrian weaknesses, they began sabotaging mining equipment and communication arrays. The telepathic Mindari were next. They had been hiding in the outer regions of the galaxy since their defeat, but human intelligence about Zephyrian tactics gave them the confidence to start fighting back. Their mental abilities proved devastating when combined with human guerrilla strategies. Even the peaceful Harmony Collective began to help. They could not bring themselves to fight directly, but they started providing medical aid and supplies to resistance movements across the galaxy. Their vast resources and hidden supply networks became crucial to the growing rebellion. Commander Vrextal watched his empire crumbling with growing desperation. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Conquered worlds were rising in rebellion. Supply convoys were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced. His own soldiers were requesting transfers away from human-occupied territory. "How is this possible?" he demanded during an emergency meeting with his senior commanders. "They are a primitive species with inferior technology. We should have crushed them in days." Lieutenant Kexamore, now promoted to commander after the previous officer had been killed in a human ambush, tried to explain what they were facing. "Sir, the humans do not fight like any species we have encountered before. They treat warfare as a problem to be solved rather than a contest of strength. Every time we develop a new tactic, they find a way to counter it within days." Vrextal slammed his clawed fist on the table. They are animals. How can animals be smarter than the greatest military minds in Zephyrian history? But deep down, he was beginning to understand the truth. The humans were not animals. They were something far more dangerous. They were a species that refused to accept defeat, even when facing impossible odds. More troubling reports continued to arrive. Human ships were now operating deep in Zephyrian territory, attacking military bases that had been considered completely safe. Human tactics were being used by rebel forces on worlds that the Zephyrians had controlled for centuries. The hunters had become the hunted, and for the first time in 3,000 years, the Zephyrian hunting consortium was afraid. 1 year after the Zephyrians first arrived at Earth, Commander Vrextal found himself trapped in the Kepler system with the last remnants of his once mighty fleet. What had started as 50 powerful warships was now reduced to 12 damaged vessels running low on fuel and ammunition. Admiral Nancy Foster commanded the human fleet that had cornered the alien forces. She had been a cargo ship captain before the war, but necessity had turned her into one of humanity's most effective military leaders. Her fleet was a mixture of converted civilian ships, captured alien vessels, and the few purpose-built warships that Earth had managed to construct during the conflict. "This is Admiral Foster of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet," she broadcast on all frequencies. "Commander Vrextal, you are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender now, and your remaining crew will be treated according to the rules of war." Vrextal stared at the human ships surrounding his position. Many of them had been cargo haulers or mining vessels just a year ago. Others were Zephyrian ships that had been captured and modified with human technology. The sight filled him with rage and disbelief. "Impossible," he hissed to his remaining officers. "How can primitives have defeated the greatest military force in the galaxy?" Lieutenant Kexmore, his scales now dull with exhaustion and stress, checked the tactical display one more time. "Sir, we are outnumbered 5-1. Our weapons are at 30% power. The humans have been jamming our communications for the past 6 hours. The final battle was swift and decisive. The human ships moved with coordination that seemed almost telepathic. They had learned to fight as a single organism, each ship supporting the others in ways that the individualistic Zephyrians could not match. Captain Danny Rodriguez led his ghost fleet in a pincer movement that cut off the alien escape routes. Captain Jake Morrison commanded the heavy assault ships that hammered the Zephyrian shields until they collapsed. Even Captain Alex Chen was there, leading fighter squadrons that swarmed around the alien ships like angry insects. When Vrextal's flagship finally lost power and began to drift helplessly in space, he expected the humans to destroy it and end his life. Instead, boarding pods attached to his hull and human soldiers poured into his ship. They moved through the corridors with the same ruthless efficiency they had shown throughout the war. But when Vrextal was finally captured and brought before the human leaders, something unexpected happened. Instead of being executed or tortured, he found himself sitting in what the humans called a courtroom. President Helen Carter sat behind a large wooden desk, flanked by Admiral Roy Bennett and other human officials. Vrextal had expected to face barbarians who would gloat over their victory. Instead, he found himself looking at beings who seemed almost sad about what they had been forced to do. "Commander Vrextal," President Carter said, her voice firm but not cruel. "You and your consortium stand accused of crimes against sentient life. For 3,000 years, your people have murdered, enslaved, and tortured innocent beings across the galaxy." Vrextal's yellow eyes widened in confusion. "You speak of crimes? We are the apex predators of the galaxy. We take what we want from those too weak to stop us. This is the natural order." Carter shook her head slowly. "That was the old order. The galaxy has new protectors now. Your reign of terror is over." She leaned forward, her eyes meeting his directly. "Your species will face justice for your actions. But we are not like you. Surrender your remaining forces, provide reparations to your victims, and your people can have a future. Continue fighting, and we will show you what humans are truly capable of when we stop holding back." The threat in her words was quiet, but unmistakable. Vrextal had seen what humans could do when they were desperate. He did not want to find out what they could do when they were truly angry. Within 3 days, the Zephyrian Hunting Consortium had surrendered unconditionally. The news was broadcast across the galaxy, reaching species that had lived in fear for millennia. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had thought they would never be free began to hope again. But humanity's work was just beginning. The Terran Commonwealth that emerged from the war became something the galaxy had never seen before. Instead of conquering defeated enemies, humans helped them rebuild. Instead of demanding tribute, they offered protection and alliance. Dr. Maya Thompson led scientific expeditions to worlds that had been damaged by Zephyrian raids, sharing human technology to help with reconstruction. Colonel Pete Jackson established training academies, where former victims could learn the guerrilla tactics that had proven so effective against oppression. Captain Danny Rodriguez became the first human to command a multi-species fleet, working with Arcturan, Mindari, and dozens of other species to patrol the galaxy and prevent future threats. His Ghost Fleet evolved into a rapid response force that could appear anywhere in the galaxy within days. The former Zephyrian territories were transformed into free republics, with human advisors helping to establish fair governments. The slave colonies became independent worlds with human protection guarantees. Even the Zephyrians themselves were given a chance to rebuild their society without the culture of violence that had defined them for so long. Within 10 years, the galaxy looked completely different. Trade routes that had been controlled by fear were now protected by cooperation. Species that had hidden in remote systems came forward to join the growing alliance. Scientific knowledge and cultural exchange flourished under human protection. Commander Vrextal spent his remaining years in a human prison, writing his memoirs about the fall of the consortium. In his final entry, he wrote something that would be quoted by historians for generations to come. "We thought we were the apex predators of the galaxy. We believed that strength and cruelty made us superior to all other life. But we learned too late that there is something far more powerful than violence. The humans taught us that cooperation, determination, and the refusal to surrender in the face of injustice can overcome any enemy." The galaxy now had new guardians, and for the first time in thousands of years, peaceful species could explore the stars without fear, knowing that somewhere among them humans were standing watch.